We call it STEM music indeed. Welcome to the STEMusic Podcast, where we highlight multicultural STEM professionals and the music they love, providing valuable insights to emerging professionals in STEM. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest. In STEM Music Nation, we're going to take our time with this intro, so sit back and relax. She comes from the S in STEM, so science. She holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry and business, a master's degree in public administration, and a doctorate in educational leadership, all from Wichita State University. Over 30 years, she has served in roles ranging from residence hall director to assistant dean of Fairmont College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and ultimately the vice president for strategic engagement and planning at Wichita State University. Her areas of responsibility varied over the years and included community and economic development, strategic planning, assessment and accreditation, and coordination of WSU's first-generation student services. Her longest appointment at WSU was as director of the TRIO Upward Bound Math and Science program. Yes, we are still going. Gonna give those flowers where flowers are due. After her time at Wichita State University, she pivoted to the Kansas Leadership Center and served in the inaugural role of Chief Impact Officer. An active community servant, she currently serves as a board member for Nexus, a nonprofit that catalyzes startup ecosystems, a board member for the Kansas African American Museum, and for Emprise Bank. She is also a trustee for the Wichita Land Bank and advisor to the Ulrich Museum at Wichita State University. Now, another thing to know is our guest is also passionate about leadership and has the experience to know all about this topic, as she has served as the board chair of Tri-State, regional, and national boards, including Council for Opportunity in Education, which is a Washington-based college access and success professional association and advocacy group. I have also witnessed her leadership on several occasions as I worked for her in college, and she advised me while I was serving as the president of the WSU National Society of Black Engineers chapter. Y'all, she is truly like a second mother to me and someone who has informed my personal and professional journey. STEM Music Nation, please help me welcome President and Chief Executive Officer of the Kansas Leadership Center, Dr. Kaye Monk Morgan, to the STEM Music Podcast. Welcome, Dr. Kaye Monk Morgan. How are you doing?
I am affirmed in
I
all
love
the ways.
that. That's what we try to do here.
Oh, my goodness.
We got to give the flowers. First of all, I'm just really excited to sit down with you and have this conversation that I think has been in my mind for probably like 5 to 7 years.
Wow.
Of just thinking about having a conversation about our journeys, about your journey, you've been highlighted in so many ways, but I want to highlight you in the way that I see you to the world and showcase your brilliance, your genius, your care, all the things that I just mentioned in your bio and your introduction. So thank you for sitting down with me.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I love it. So on the STEM Music Podcast, we always start with the same question.
Yes.
And it's all about, how did you get into STEM? So can you think of a story of, hey, this is a world that I became interested in, and I said, you know what, I want to start on that journey. What was that thing for you?
Wow, it was high school.
Okay.
And in high school, you know, they block schedule you and put you in classes. I had a chemistry teacher who was fantastic, and even more important than my chemistry teacher were my lab partners.
Come on, lab partner. You know, you can have some good fun with some lab partners,
right? Your lab partner is the way to get through. And so I became a chemist in high school. It was a class that I loved. I took 2 or 3 courses, as many as I possibly could with that particular instructor. When I went to Wichita State, it was an area where I felt like I had some experience as a freshman. And so I ended up taking classes. And then I looked up and I had enough courses to actually declare chemistry as a major. It wasn't necessarily my intention. I wanted to be a patent attorney.
What? Oh, wait a minute.
Right.
What?
I know, right? I wanted to be a patent lawyer. But I was taking the chemistry classes because I knew chemistry and I was good and I was trying to get my GPA up. Hashtag whoever says that, right?
Right.
And I worked in a law firm and decided that would probably be a miserable job. So then I had to figure out something else to do.
I've known you for so long, and
Yeah.
I have never known that story, which is why I was so
Yeah.
excited I'm like,
Yeah.
what is the background behind this STEM and chemistry and
Yeah.
all these things? So you just went to Wichita State University and said, I'm just going to take chemistry classes because I enjoyed this in high
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was a business major. And just about every other African American woman my age was also a business major. And it
Okay.
became very clear to me that from a competitive advantage, that might not work on my behalf, right? So
Wow.
I looked and I was taking chemistry classes, not because I intended to be a chemistry major or because I declared a chemistry major, but because that's where I had a level of confidence. And I had been told, build up your GPA as strong as you can, your freshman and sophomore years, with the things that you already know.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the hard stuff comes, you have a little bit of cushion,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can get a C in Calc 2 if you've done all
Talk
the other
about
things,
it.
right? And that's how I got there. I went to see an advisor and they were like, well, you're not a chemistry major?
Wow.
I was like, well, no.
This is really incredible to me. First of all, STEM Music Nation, in that intro, you heard strategic a couple different times in there. And one thing I know about Dr. Kaye Monk Morgan, you're gonna be strategic.
Yes.
So even back then, it's so cool to take a peek back in history and to see
Yeah.
that you were already thinking that way. It's reminding me of Michelle Obama. That's what it's reminding me
Oh,
of. Like
well,
when she talks about
I'll
her
take it.
kindergarten class and how she was like, I missed this word and I have to come back the next day and prove that I know that.
I
Like
know it.
there's
Yes.
so much thought going on. It wasn't just I'm in college bopping around. It's you
No.
really had a purpose and intention at that time. So that's so interesting. So you end up having enough credits to then matriculate through
Mhm.
with a chemistry degree and a business degree.
Yeah.
And so what was your thought process once you kind of finished or coming to graduation and like
Yeah.
what were you going to do? Because now I feel like you have these two things that are in front of you and you have some choices, you have some
paths.
options. Yeah.
Well, you know what's really interesting as a first generation college student, graduate, I didn't know what those choices were.
Ooh.
What I knew is that I know how to go to school and I know how to get good grades and I know how to perform that which is put in front of me. How to get a
Mm.
job? I didn't have anybody in my life who had a professional role or who put on a suit and went to work every day or who worked for a corporation I didn't have that.
Wow.
So I didn't know what I was going to do. So I went back to school.
Okay. Okay. Well, and
Yeah.
this is all a part of this conversation. So because you mentioned it, we're here. Like, let's
Yeah.
have the conversation about what that experience was like. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but being a first generation student,
Man.
myself, I feel like I kind of had that similar experience, but I think people hear that intro, right? They hear, CEO, Kansas Leadership
Yeah.
Center. We're going to talk about that later, but like you were first generation. So what
Yes.
was that experience
Yeah.
like coming in? Although you had, strategy and clearly a bright mind, someone who you had, an amazing future ahead of them. There was still that feeling and that experience of
Oh,
being first generation.
absolutely.
So tell us a little bit
Well,
about
there are
that.
just gaps in knowledge, right? And muscle memory. My parents and grandparents loved me dearly. I never wanted for love and support and affirmation, but they did not have information,
Mm.
nor did they have social capital.
Mm.
And so the idea of navigating how do you get a job, literally, I was an African American woman with a chemistry degree, and I didn't know how to get a job.
Wow.
I didn't know to go to student services. I didn't know to go to the placement office. I applied for one job at um, a plating company,
Okay.
and I walked in, and everyone they make parts to support aircraft
Okay. Okay.
manufacturing, and it was dirty, and it was stinky, and it was a lot of things that I was like, I don't know why I went to college to come home every day looking like my dad did as a roofer. That's
Wow.
not what I'm doing. Um, I had been a strong student leader on campus, much like your experience there, and so had an opportunity to then do some work with the residence halls. And that's how I got into the higher ed space.
Okay.
Graduate school was affordable at that point.
Yeah.
I'd gone to college on a full ride scholarship. So to get a master's degree that was partially paid for was, again, a strategic move. So I was like, I'll do this job. They'll pay for me to go back to school. And maybe I'll get a degree that I know what to do with.
Mm.
But I just I didn't have the wherewithal or the knowledge. My family didn't have the knowledge, and I didn't have the social network.
I'm so glad that you shared that, because I think a lot of times society, the world, people who may not come from the same backgrounds as us, the Black and brown community, it's like, well, yeah, just go do X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
and get it done, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you don't know what you don't know, you
It
don't
doesn't work.
know. It
Yeah.
doesn't work. And
Doesn't
so
work.
I love hearing that part of your story, because I think although you still kept taking steps forward, pursuing what success was for you, you still had to go through this, murky unknown
Oh,
of
absolutely.
what do I do? How do I do it? And I always, in starting STEM music, trying to reach the next generation of Black and brown students, in STEM, and providing some sort of roadmap. I think that's why I get so passionate about it, because
Yeah.
when you do go through it and you're not aware, fortunately I had people like you and your husband, Derek, to mentor and guide. But yeah, if you really don't know how to progress through it, when it comes to
Yeah.
internships, when it comes to who to apply, all this stuff,
Yep.
it's like those are the things that are intangible, that if you have a parent or a family member who has done that or is
Yeah.
working in that
Yes.
STEM career,
Yeah.
you know what it looks like. You know how to progress.
Absolutely.
You know how to do all those things. And so a lot of times for our communities, the communities we represent, it's just not like that. Or even for women,
Right.
we are honoring Women's History Month, and so of course having you as a guest, and I think there's so many different perspectives that you bring. So I'm just grateful that you're sharing that piece
Yeah.
of the story. So you end up going to grad school,
I go to grad school.
and your master's in public administration.
Yes.
Now, were you thinking, I'm sure you were, but tell us what you were thinking at that point, and what that then led to.
Yeah. So at that point, it led to me running an AmeriCorps program.
Okay.
So a federally funded volunteer service, kind of like the Peace Corps, but America-based,
Okay.
U.S.-based.
And was that associated with
version.
WSU, or was
It
that
was associated
okay.
with WSU out of the Hugo Law School,
Okay.
which was the program that I was in. And I did that for a year, and then I ended up being recruited to go to the Office of Admissions. And then from the Office of Admissions, I ended up going to TRIO. And so
Wow.
it became a thing. People ask me, I am a strategic person, so I don't want to leave your viewership thinking I'm not. And many of the steps I've taken have not been my design. I am clear that there are forces bigger than me,
Yes,
that have designed and have moved me from place to place in order to give me the opportunity to learn, experience, and grow in the areas that I need to before the next. And so I don't know why I was in housing, but housing led to academic affairs. Academic affairs led to enrollment management. Enrollment management led back to academic affairs with the TRIO piece. Leaving TRIO sent me back to the very college and the very dean, or he was a dean when I came back. As when I came to assistant dean, he had been a professor.
Wow.
So all those things, it's chess, not checkers.
Yeah. And the puzzle pieces, and following that guiding light, that
Absolutely.
internal voice, your gut, God, like all of those things. And I feel like I've have that similar journey too, of like, yes, I want to have strategy, and I want to be, intentional in how I'm trying to move forward, but I also want to be open
Yes.
to the path that God may have
Whatever
for me.
God has for you.
Look,
Absolutely.
and a lot of times, I'll be trying to do all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, that's not
That's
it.
not it.
That's not it, and still is gracious. But no, that is very interesting. So STEMusic Nation, we crossed paths when I became a freshman at Wichita State University, and Dr. Monk Morgan was advising National Society of Black Engineers. But actually, kind of before that, someone in the dorms, shout out to Kriana, was your mentee, because she was in Upward Bound Math and Science, from the Kansas City area. Or was she from Wichita?
From Kansas City
area. That's what I thought. Okay, and so it was really interesting, because she's like, oh, you need to meet my mentor. I mean, she was just like talking about you so crazily, and I was like, who is this woman?
I remember when we met.
When did we meet?
In the parking lot of the Radigan Student
I was
Center.
getting ready to yes.
I remember.
That was such an important, I tell people about that to this day. And I can't remember if I know that's where we met, but I can't remember. Did I meet Derek at that same time?
No, he was
It
not
was a
there.
little bit later.
Yeah.
But meeting you and being like, wow, she's everything Cree said and more.
Yeah.
Just your energy, your passion for the next generation, your passion for Black and brown students. Having a chemistry background. I was like, what? Like,
Right. Where did she come from?
It went from like, who is this woman to who is this woman?
Oh,
Wow.
you're
Like,
silly.
like, who is this amazing?
Yeah.
Like, it was so incredible. And then, from meeting you in that first meeting, you're like,
Yep.
you need to meet my husband.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was the first thing you said. And I talked to Derek Morgan, STEMusic Nation, because there was an episode that he was on. And he made such a huge difference in my life,
Yeah.
in my career trajectory in college, of being the first Black aerospace engineer that I ever met in my life.
Yep.
And it changed so much for me. I believed I could pursue this and do this, but after meeting him, I knew I could do it.
Yeah,
it went from like, I'm believing to like, wow, I'm looking at
I'm
him.
doing it.
Yeah, this is going to happen. And so you all have been so important to my journey in my life. And so, but I think in that, going back to Trio Upward Bound Math and Science, I ended up my first job actually, like while in college, besides working at the Child Development Center over the summer, looking for internships and that sort of thing, and going to all the career fairs and like, have experience because I was a freshman. And so it's like, well, how am I going to get the experience? And I remember, you telling me a little bit more about Upward Bound Math and Science. And so I ended up working for you as a TC in Fairmount Towers, which doesn't exist anymore.
I know, it's gone.
And it was an incredible summer just to learn more about the program, interact with the students, try to pour into some of the students. And when I see them on Instagram and Facebook doing all the things, I'm just like, wow, I remember being in the dorms and
they were 14.
It's just crazy to me. And so I think the story I shared about you and Derek and how you all inspired me, and seeing someone who looked like me, and especially in math and science, in engineering, in STEM, that's Upward Bound Math and Science. I mean, that's STEM. And so in that, tell us a little bit about that journey of leading that organization and your passion for the next generation and students. I mean, you spent quite a lot of time leading that. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
It's the best job I've ever had. Anything else will pale in comparison. I'm having a good time doing what I'm doing, but it's not that work. When you get a chance to given my background and where I came from, right? Just the notion of being bright, having the will, the ability, and the determination to get a degree takes a lot.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that I had really strong family support, and that family support could only go so far.
Yeah.
Right? Every one of my Upward Bound Math Science kids, 584 of them, all 584.
She knows the number, STEMusic Nation. I'm just saying, like, this is
584.
How passionate she is about her students.
Babies came through. Every one of them was me. Every one of them had skills and abilities and a willingness, but had one or two things that they just didn't have. Yeah. And so it was my life's work was to open doors for young people. It is still to this day.
Yeah.
I still feel like that is my vocation, in spite of the fact I'm in a different location. Every time I thought I was ready to leave, I would say to my husband, once Angie graduates, right? I just got to get this one baby out. And when she goes to college, I'll be done. And then sure enough, there'd be another one. And I'm like, well, when Daphne is done, or when Jose finishes, or Brandon really needs me. And if I'm not here, right? So some of it may be a little bit of a savior complex.
Sure.
But the other part is, if I'm not going to do it, who's going to do it? And who's going to love them the way that I love them, right? Ultimately, lots of people. I came to learn.
Sure.
Other people can do it. But they weren't going to do it then.
And they weren't going to do it in the way that you were going to do it.
These are my babies.
I so resonate with that. Yeah.
My babies. So loved that work. Not only did I love it for what I got to do on a day-to-day basis, but the opportunity I had to engage in national advocacy and the professional development side of things. People often will say, well, man, you came out of nowhere. I was like, no, I've been doing this work for a really long time.
I've been in the trenches.
I was just doing it for free and nationally and regionally, So people in my local community may not have seen what I was doing. But so building those skills, my grandma used to say, not everybody needs to know everything you're doing. Well, this was a case where most people didn't know what I was doing. They knew I was traveling because I'd post on Facebook.
They're like, oh, she's here, she's
right,
there,
she's everywhere. Well, I got to do lots of really important and cool things in these volunteer roles. And so I would make sure that STEM Nation, particularly young people who are thinking about how they grow their careers, you may be placed in a position for pay that doesn't give you the type of growth opportunities that you want.
Yeah.
But you can always find a volunteer opportunity that will teach you the very thing that you need to know in order to progress to the next level. And that's what I did with Upward Bound.
That is so powerful. And, you read my mind, because that's exactly where I was going to go, because I think, part of the relaunch of STEMusic podcast and getting to talk to STEMusic Nation visually, hey, y'all out there, is to focus a little bit more on that part of it, right? The career aspect of things, STEMusic Nation, a lot of y'all who tune in are, peers of mine, or those who are early young professionals to mid-career professionals. And a lot of times there is this thing of, how do I get to the top of this ladder? How do I climb? And some of it, because of what financially, how that can impact your life. And that's not a bad thing, right?
No,
some of it is, hey, I have these goals and I want to, impact change. Not bad things. Some of it sometimes is, people just trying to, have status and stuff like that. And flex and all that stuff. And so I love you came, and thank you so much for doing this twice, to speak to our interns at Spirit Aero Systems when I was leading the internship program at the time. And you told the story about you working in Upward Bound Math and Science, but doing all this volunteer stuff on the side at a national, regional, state level, to where, to your point of what you just said, people were kind of like, how does she just step into these leadership positions? Right. Where does she come from? Like, what is, meanwhile, I knew the story all along, right? Yeah. I'm watching all this stuff and I'm like, oh, this is dope. Like, this is so cool. Like, I know that she's been in the trenches. She's done the work. Yeah. I mean, it's so, it's so different when you're someone who's actually doing the work. And then, being in a position and you actually understand how things work. You have the background of your personal experience as a student coming up through the educational system, and then, being able to enact some of those changes in the volunteer work that you did. So this is kind of a two-pronged, question, and you kind of answered some of it, but one, like, what would you say further about that journey of trying to progress through the career, a career, and maybe wanting to rush to get somewhere, and that part of it, and how to manage that journey. But I guess the other thing too is, I know there's probably people out there who feel like, why is everyone else getting this and getting that? Because I'm sure over your time, it was 20 years in Upward Bound Math and Science, I'm sure you saw peers at the banquets, at the different things, who are like, VP of this of this, and yes, you love your babies.
Yes.
584, you love your kids and all the stuff and what you're doing, but you're also looking around like, now I done been in the game, what's going on? So,
well, I'm also making $50,000 doing it.
So how did you, like I said, two-prong of like, how do you manage that journey of trying to rise, but also, I guess, managing the emotions and maybe the frustration or the like, why is this not happening for me?
I think two things. I think one is, first and foremost, get good at something. Right? I work with lots of young folks who are eager for promotive responsibility, but aren't good at anything. And so
that's good. That's
they're
really,
just not good at anything.
That's good.
And so I'll have to come back and say, tell me what you're good at. Like, what is the one thing that you will knock out of the box? Because if you can tell me that, I can extrapolate whether or not the thing you're good at will help you in the thing you want to be able to do, or the thing that I have next in mind for you to do. And in some cases, people just aren't ready.
Gotcha.
So I think it's knowing what you're good at, developing a skill set, some expertise, and then asking folks who've been in the game for a while, what do I need to accompany this, right? If I have my meat, what are my potatoes? What are the other things, other skills that might be necessary, right? I advise folks often to find the job that you think you want. Look at what's required. And if you can't do those things, figure out a way to learn how to do them. I literally when I applied to be the vice president for strategic and planning, or actually it was a job before that in the provost office.
Okay.
I got the job based on having experience creating strategic plans. Now, I'd created a strategic plan for my TRIO program,
Yeah.
but the plan I referred to was the one I did as a committee member for the National Council for Opportunity in Education,
That
because I
part.
served on that committee for 3 years.
Yeah.
I built that strategic plan.
Wow.
I measured that strategic plan and set up the next version of that. That's what helped me get the job, not the work that I was being paid for. And so I think we underestimate. We feel like our job is supposed to give us everything that we need in order to get to the next place. And rarely have I ever seen that happen. So you got to look for it. The other thing that was for me, part of the 20 years, what allowed me to be a parent.
Okay.
And to take my kids came to Upward Bound with me during the summer.
Yes, they
You know,
did.
there was a rule at one point, don't step on the Morgan boys. You know, if they come in and they want your snacks, you better give them to them, because if you don't feed my kids, I'm not feeding you. All those rules happened. So they grew up
Yeah.
in that system. I mean, literally, Peyton was born in February, right after I started
Wow.
the job. So all he knew was at work. And Upward Bound allowed me to do that. So I was able to say, you know, I get to be a mom.
Mm.
I'm doing really cool work where I feel like God has placed me, and I'm uniquely gifted and talented in this particular time of my life to do this work. And I have these volunteer opportunities where I'm flying all over the world. I went to Brazil, Ireland, Africa, all these places as a volunteer
Mm.
in the organizations,
That's powerful.
right? And so, yeah, you go ahead and get your what you get, because that's not what God has for me.
Yeah.
What God has for me right now is an opportunity to make an impact in the young lives of these babies whom I love, to be a really on-the-job mom for the kids that I have, and to do some really significant work on the national level. And it allowed my kids to see me differently. I'll never forget Peyton coming home one day in high school, and he was like, Mom, my friends' moms don't ever go anywhere.
He said, what they doing?
Right.
My mom traveling everywhere.
My mama's gone all the time. I needed them to see this is what it looks like to be a part of a community moving work forward.
Yeah.
Right? You don't do that from your living room all the time. Now, you can write some checks and make some significant
Yes.
impacts in some places. But sometimes you just have to do the grunt work.
And you know what I love about this? Because of Women's History Month, I know young women in their, you know, middle of their career or wherever they are, like, I love that you shared that, because I think because of society and, you know, expectations on
Yeah.
motherhood and all of that, I think you just paint such a good picture. And because I know you and I know your sons, they adore you. Like the way they talk about you when you are not present, you know, they adore you as their mother, you know? And so I think, I don't know, it's just a powerful testament to what is possible
Yeah.
and what could be done, being a woman in industry, whatever it may be. I don't know, you know, maybe for, you know, someone in their career, a woman in their career right now, you know, young career, mid-career, is there any other points besides what you just shared? Because I think that was such a golden nugget of being able to say, hey, because I think what I heard in there was you can craft it to what you want it to be.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to just be this one thing of what society says or overdoing something because you want to make it. So what would you maybe offer to someone out there who's kind of going through that and trying to figure out what they want?
I think so. I grew up, there was a commercial that used to come on. It was a perfume commercial, and the jingle was something like, I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and make you never forget you're the man, because I'm a woman, da 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 da. I believe you can have it all. I don't think you can have it all at the same time. Right? I think there are stages to this. There's a time in my life where I felt like I was a fantastic mom, but a sucky wife. Just didn't do it well. Just didn't do it well. Right now, I'm an absolutely fantastic wife, right? I'm home. We get to go out and eat. We get to hang out together. My husband is my boyfriend. It's so awesome, right? I also work really hard.
Yeah.
So when you have limited time, I think you have to just decide where is the greatest ROI for me. And I decided that I would rather do the job that people thought was beneath me and make copies at my kids' school once a week for a time. Now, I will say, Cameron graduated from high school. I left Upward Bound. Cameron graduated from college. I left Wichita State.
Mm.
And I'm the better for it. And I think he is too.
Yeah.
I think he is too.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it just paints a picture of what is possible.
Yeah.
And not only what is possible, I appreciate the vulnerability of sharing the parts that weren't so great, because I think a lot of times people are looking, at people in the world like, oh, she's
got
doing
it
this, she's
all.
doing that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, there's behind the scenes, there's
Yeah.
stuff that you do have to, progress through, process through. And just for young professionals in general, mid-career professionals in general, trying to figure out what those next steps are. And I
Yeah.
love what you said, that you can have it all, but just not at the same time.
Not at the same time.
I love that, because I think then that helps you to maybe start shifting a perspective or a thought process of back to strategy. What am I prioritizing at this moment for what I want down the road?
That's what helps you not have envy or look at somebody else's path and want that. When I feel like I've decided, I decided that this is where I wanted my greatest investment to be right now. Now, 2 years from now, it's on, because my decision will be different.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm engaging differently. I'm showing up in different places. I have a different set of goals and objectives. But if you can decide that what's most important for me right now, I used to jokingly say Upward Bound was my stay-at-home mom job. I had lots of junior league colleagues and friends that were like, I can't believe you work, and you work so many hours. I do. I work hard. And I have I gave birth to 2 kids, but I have a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And so they're showing up all the time. And at some point, you can manage that. So once you get to be able to manage that piece, then you can add some other things. But all of it at one point at the same level, for me, has been impossible.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that and breaking it down and just giving us a peek inside your world of that journey. And so from Upward Bound Math and Science, you then, matriculate still at Wichita State University, right? But you matriculate into the leadership, side of things.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, I want to go back back into formal education of getting my doctorate in educational leadership. So I'm interested in that part of your journey of pivoting to Wichita State University in the sense of upper leadership and going back for your doctorate.
Yeah. Not every time, many times in my life when I've made a choice to leave, I'll go back to, it wasn't my choice. What I know for sure for me is that God will make me incredibly uncomfortable in a space where I am very comfortable in order to get me to move.
That part.
I stayed at Upward Bound for 20 years in spite of having opportunities to have gone and done any number of different things. But I allowed myself to stay because of this kid. Usually there's a kid and I can put a name on it at the point in time that kid was matriculating through the program. In 2017, I was finishing my term as the board chair for the council. Cameron was coming up on his senior year, and I didn't love what I was doing anymore. And so it was time to go. And so the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences called and said, I have a role. Would you be interested? Had it have been anybody else, I still might have said no, but it wasn't.
That divine opportunity and moment.
Yeah. And so what I know for sure is that God has figured out, in case he didn't know right from the beginning, but he's figured out that when he's ready for me to move, he has to make me uncomfortable. And then he has to send me a person with whom I have trust and an affinity for, and then I'll move. Not for the person, but because he sent the person.
That's good. That's good. Yes.
So I'm not moving for Ron or Rick or even Ed. I'm moving because God sent them to the door. And I was like, I prayed for, and here you are. Yeah. Right? So when I left Upward Bound, I had, I think, 3 jobs in 4 years.
Okay. Wow. That's rapid.
It was rapid. What people would say was rapid progression. So I went to the dean's office. I was there for about 9 months. I started the doctorate because the dean said, You cannot be the assistant dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences without a doctorate. That doesn't work.
I gotta pause right here because you're literally speaking about what you said earlier, and that so STEMusic Nation, she's not giving advice that she hasn't taken.
Yes.
She walked in those same steps, and having someone say that to you, and instead of being like, oh, they're hating on me, because I'm just telling on my generation a little bit, and the ones under me,
Yeah,
Gen Z.
I don't need that.
We can often get into that place of like, what? No, I can just, and there are cases and stuff where that can happen, right? In my life, like God things that may set you up in that way. But for him to say that to you, and then for you to say, you know what? I'm going to take stock of what it is that I have and what I'm trying to do and what I want the goals I'm trying to accomplish. And you know what? I'm going to lean into that. So I just have to pause there and call it out because, you said it,
right?
But you're actually speaking on how you've lived that out. So anyway, so then you said, okay, I think I'm going to pursue this.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it, right? If I want to live in this space, rare air, right? I'll do it because that's what's called. And he was willing to help pay for it.
That part.
And give me time, right? So all those things are aligned.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I look for alignment.
Yes.
And things don't have to be hard. When God is in the midst, my experience has been, they just line up.
My friend and I are having this conversation daily in this season of our lives of it should be easy, and not in the sense of like when you think about a relationship or a marriage or job or whatever, you're gonna go through ups and downs.
Absolutely.
But the beginning stage of it should not be this thing where you are just contorting yourself to make it happen.
No.
And so you saying that is such a that's God's confirmation right there. Just continuing to hear that message. And I think that's important for STEMusic Nation and anybody watching and listening is just, it doesn't have to be so hard when there's that alignment that you're talking about.
I don't want our listeners to think that I mean you don't have to work. Right. Because I had to get in.
Yes.
I had to do the homework. I had to show up. Just because he gave me time off didn't mean my job got less.
Right.
I still had the same amount of work to do.
I know that's right.
Right? During the day. So you can go off to your little class if you want to, but you better respond to my emails within 24 hours.
Yes.
Right? It's not a quid pro quo.
Yeah.
This is in addition to
thank you for clarifying that, because that is something I think some people do miss.
You're like, oh no, he's gonna let me do this, so I do less of that. No, you get to just do more.
In my experience, it has been the same way. It's like there's still the work, there's still the intentional part of it, but the resistance of that is not there. Of like, oh, I got to do this, and I don't have an understanding person who's all of the different things like you said kind of came together.
Well, they don't have to understand. That's not their role, right? If you're being forged, it's not somebody's job to take you out of the fire. If you're supposed to be in the fire.
Yes.
You got to sit in that.
This is so good.
You got to sit in that, right? So I sat through that for about 9 months, and then the provost called and said, hey, I've got a role I think you'll be perfect for. So note, I had 2 promotions. I didn't apply for any job. So I did one job for 9 months. I moved over to the provost office. New president comes in and says, I've been watching you. I'd like to promote you to this role. So in 3 years, I had 3 different jobs.
You're just dropping so many good nuggets. So I apologize for the interruptions, but I just want people to get it. You just said, the president said, I've been watching you.
Yes.
And I think so many times in corporate America, nonprofits, whatever you're doing, music career, whatever you're doing, if you're committed to doing the work and doing it well, there's always people watching. And 9 times out of 10, it's leadership, especially in the corporate space or
absolutely.
There's people watching leadership who have the control over your destiny. God has that control, but in the context of a company or a university. And so, man, I used to say that to interns all the time, like, show up, do your part, do it to the best of your ability. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but people are watching, and people are, a mentor of mine told me this, Roy, people are speaking your name in rooms that you are not in.
That's the point, right? That is the point. When I met the incoming then president, he hadn't even started yet.
Wow.
We're at a luncheon and he says, let's go have a cup of coffee. he had already talked to people.
Wow.
I don't know who people are,
Right.
right? I don't know who those people are, but it was clear he had a dossier.
Yeah.
It was clear that he had a plan, and he had written me into the plan without even having had a conversation with me. That conversation confirmed that he was making a good choice. But all the people who watch on a daily basis,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't even just him watching. It's all the people who are in your environment.
Yes.
What is your brand?
Yes.
What do people say about you? This notion of who you are and how people speak your name in rooms you're not present in. Are people willing to sponsor you or to create opportunities for you to gain access into spaces?
Yeah.
I don't think that's what I meant when I said I didn't have social capital, right? I didn't have a brand. I didn't have parents who had a name. I didn't show up at the NAACP luncheons, right? I didn't have any of that. Building it is in part, I have a friend who says it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Yes. That's so powerful. It's so powerful. And in my lived experience, when I was in corporate, so much of that is what was happening, you
Yeah.
know? Going from engineering to HR was like, what? Like, how does that even happen?
Right.
And it being, it's interesting as you were telling the story about all the volunteer work that you were doing and how that gave you the experience to then go on, and in your interview and in your application, you weren't even talking about UBMS so much. You were talking about that national work, but also the people who knew you, right? To get you. The same thing happened in my career in corporate America. It was, okay, this engineer who's like super extroverted, which is so not common, right? But is always working with the intern program every summer, is always engaged with the community outreach. And, you know, so then when the time comes where I'm having a little stall in my career of like, I'm kind of burnt out. I want to do something different. Mentors are saying, oh, this role is open and we think, and I'm like, what? Yeah, they're talking about you in rooms. What? And then when I, you know, get to that interview, same thing of which is why I think it's so important, STEMusic Nation, to nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted.
Good.
And so my work in NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, in college, which you were advising me on, you know, a quick aside, we're going to take a little tangent. I was president of the WCU chapter and you were the advisor for the chapter. And then there came a point where kind of like a God type of moment, everyone in the national organization, you know, the national board, regional board, it's like, I had to host a conference here. You were a huge champion for me in that too, because they were like, no one's coming. That's one thing about Dr. Kaye Monk Morgan and me. If we say we're going to do something and make it happen, we're going to do it, make it happen, and it's going to be good. And no one's coming to this conference. Oh, you're going to get 200 people in Wichita. Wichita? Where is Wichita? I mean, it was this whole thing.
All the things.
And we ended up having 634 people. Just like your kids, you remember that? I remember that number because I fought for that. We had Black people skating on ice, okay? We rented out the ice rink, but you supported me in all of that. And we had a phenomenal conference. And at the end of that conference, you know, I'm just bopping around, happy the conference is over. I can go back, you know, to serve it in my chapter. And they're like, no, we want you to run for regional chair. I'm like, how you springboard from being an appointed member to a board to leading the entire board?
Because you get good at something.
That part. Because what I didn't know I was learning was in the role of planning a conference, you're working with all the chapters, all the presidents, all the regional board members, everybody, you know, you're the glue, you're like really managing so much. I'm just trying to do this conference that I did not want to plan, right? But you kind of encouraged me to lean into that and do it. And so when the regional board, you know, application and all that stuff came out and they were pressuring me and stuff, I remember coming to talk to you and I was like, but I have senior design and to the point of what we just talked about, all this other stuff, I still needed to graduate. Right. Like you can have fun in NSBE all you want, but
get a degree.
You need to get a degree. That's the whole point of NSBE, right? And I remember having that conversation with you and you saying like, well, ultimately it's your choice. I can't decide for you, but these things, these experiences that you may get, because you still have to win. And I love that part about our conversation too. It's never about being handed something.
Not at all.
It was never about, it's like, no, Roy, if you want to decide to do this, one, I'm going to support you wholeheartedly, but you're going to have to do the work and decide.
Gotta decide.
And so I end up deciding, I end up running, close election, and I end up getting elected and I'm regional chair. And through that entire process, when I got elected, there was 22 board members that are usually on the regional board. We only had 7. So what happened right after I got elected, I had to then stand up a whole operation of interviews, selecting people, getting them installed on the board and all of that. And so when it came to the HR interview, I'm going somewhere, STEMusic Nation, the same type of experience of your volunteer work right? I'm in the interview, and most, like 80% of my answers are coming from my NSBE experience of like, have you ever had experience having to bring people to Wichita and making Wichita a boom? There's the
Yes.
Fall Regional
Right.
Conference, bringing all these people, and we were underestimated, but we did it. Then it's like, oh, have you ever, had experience of, yes, recruiting the talent, but having to, schedule the and all this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, it was on this board. It
Mhm.
wasn't filled. And so all these experiences that I am proud of and I enjoyed, and it was a great, great time. I'm like, I did not think that 6 years after being in corporate America, these stories would be the stories
Yeah.
I would use in this interview to ultimately get the job. And they did take a risk, right? Because there are other candidates are people who have
Who
HR degrees and all
have
this
HR
stuff.
backgrounds.
But once I'm in the role, similar to you and your roles, I succeeded
Yeah.
and the program grew and all this stuff. So I guess I'm sharing that story because one, I don't think I've ever shared a piece of how I went from engineering to HR on the podcast, but two, for peers, for people mid-career or just thinking about the journey, it's just another example
Yeah, absolutely.
of what you're talking about. So you being in those roles, doing well in those roles at
Mhm.
Wichita State University, I am very intrigued on the pivot to Kansas Leadership Center
Yeah.
and how does that happen? And similar to how does that happen? How do you then end up in the seat you're in right now as CEO, Chief Executive Officer,
Yeah.
President of Kansas Leadership Center?
Yeah. Well, it's not too unlike any other shift.
Mm,
The difference with this one, I had rotator cuff surgery in
okay.
January of 2022.
Okay.
And again, unhappy. Love the work, but some of the politics, some of the things that are happening just don't feel
Sure.
good for me. Um, and I don't feel valued, or at least not the level of value that I feel like I bring is being appreciated. I spent 6 weeks on my sofa with a rotator cuff
Mm.
surgery. And you get to watch a lot of really affirming television. Hallmark, Everybody Falls in Love, right?
Yeah.
All the shows
Yeah.
where Black women are winning. And I prayed to God. I said, I want one job because I felt like I was doing two, at
Okay.
least two, maybe three. At that time, I had 255 people in my organization.
Mm.
We had a $28 million budget in our organization. I did accreditation, assessment, strategic planning, community engagement, and it was a lot.
That is a lot.
It was a lot. I will say that right now there are 3 people doing the job that I did.
Come on,
Right? I'm just going to name that.
She
Just
did that.
just going to name that. And so I prayed to God. I wanted one job. I wanted the job to be meaningful, and I wanted to be paid my value. And I prayed for that. And I went back to my then supervisor and said, this is what God is telling me I need to ask for. And he's emboldened me to say, this is what I need. And in one way or another, my supervisor came back and said, I can't give you that.
Mm.
And I said, okay. And I left. We didn't argue. We didn't fight. I went home and cried. I was devastated.
Yeah.
Devastated. I'd given a lot of time and energy to this institution, to these people. They're my ride or dies, I'm thinking, right? But when I asked for something, the first time I feel like I've ever asked for something, I was told no. That was God telling me, it's time for you to go.
Mm.
And I don't mean that to say when you don't get what you want, you leave or you
Right.
throw a fit, right? But I am clear that God told me this is what to ask for. And I was talking to Ed O'Malley in an alley one day coming out of a meeting. And he said, you don't look like you feel good today. I'm like, well, I'm just dealing with some stuff at work. He said to me that which 3 other people had already said, if I built a job for you, would you consider it?
Mm.
And I said, I have a job. He said, would you consider it?
Wow.
Yes. Rotator cuff surgery. Didn't get what God told me I needed. Another person showed up in God's form and said, here's what you asked for, even down to the negotiation of the salary. It's like, well, everybody on my team at this level has the same salary. I didn't need more. I just wanted to be treated equally.
Yeah.
Right? We don't like equity work or discussions in our country right now, but I wanted equity.
Yeah.
And so I got it. And I thought I was going over to do that job. I thought I was chilling. I had one direct report. I went from 22 to 1. It was awesome. Awesome. That was in April of 2022. That Ed left KLC in August.
Okay.
In March of 2023, I became the president and CEO.
Wow. Wow.
Right.
That is a transition.
Right.
So in that time, what was happening that's pretty wild. Like,
It's very wild.
going from chief impact officer was the
Chief
role
impact officer.
to
Chilling.
and probably like you said, just so content. And God
Yeah.
he just knows how to
Right.
push us to where
I was
he
like,
wants us to be.
I'm
Yeah.
cool. I'm good.
So what led to that, and what has the experience been like in this role now?
Yeah, it's been both the most exciting time and a terrifying time, right? This was not my vision. I didn't ordain that one day I'm going to be a president of a nonprofit or I'm going to do international work on leadership. That was not. But you can, if I, old folks used to say, when I look back over my life,
Come on.
ha!
And I see all the things. Don't get me started in here.
Right. When I
Yes.
look back, all those things were preparation for this thing. There have been lots of significant wins. I'm having a really good time. And there are days when I have to remind myself I'm the president, right? That means something different.
Yeah.
That means something different. That notion of the buck stops here, right? We at the Kansas Leadership Center, of course, we believe and live into, we believe everyone has a responsibility and space to exercise leadership. It's not just people with authority in the system, but everybody's supposed to do that. I'm working in a system where that happens. That hasn't always been my historical frame,
Yeah.
right? So I'm having to shift some of those muscles or build new muscles to manage in this new space. I have to build a completely different network of people outside of higher ed and outside of TRIO that are doing in all types of really interesting work. And so there's a learning curve for me.
Sure.
So at 53, I'm learning again. I'm the new kid. And so I'm picking up skills. I'm sharpening skills that I had and haven't used for a while because I was chilling. But it's been good. It's been good.
That's awesome. And it's very interesting to me because you said, one, I have a KLC story that I am going to share because I'm sitting with the president and CEO of KLC. And I don't know that I've had the opportunity. Maybe I told a quick version to Ed O'Malley, but please share it with him too. Please pass it along to him. This is a powerful story in my life. But I think it's so incredible to see your path and your journey to this place. And one of the things I love about the Kansas Leadership Center is you all really do believe in that anyone can lead, and that it's not just about the position, which a lot of times the world thinks about it in that way. And when you go to the website, you are not at the top of the website as you're. I said, oh, I'm trying to find her. Where's she at? And I'm scrolling through the things
alphabetical.
And so, but it's really it's cool because I think when you see something, that's something so subtle and little, but I think it just underscores what the belief is, behind KLC. So, we're going to get ready to jump to, the music portion of the podcast and talk about some music and have the STEMusic jingle. But a couple more things on leadership. And one, like I said, with the KLC story. So Kansas Leadership Center, I'm in college at the time. At the time, there was something called Engineering 2020.
Yes.
And you had to get 3 requirements out of the 6 that were listed. And it was part of our graduation, in getting an engineering degree. And so I got an internship, had the internship portion. I got a math minor because we take so much math. And then one of the other requirements was leadership. And because I was I was the president of NSBE, which, by the way, that happened as an accident. I don't know if you fully remember that story, but I was not elected to be president of NSBE.
Yeah.
Patrick handed me a box and said, Patrick was the former president, and said, you're the president now. Like when the guy in the movie says, I am the captain now, he literally was like, you're the president now. And I was like, what? So it was a crash course. And it's crazy to me because I'm so passionate about leadership. And I just think it's so powerful and it can do so many amazing things. It can do harmful things. I mean, there's so much power in it. And if it's done right and done well, so many amazing things can happen. So I've grown in that. But at that time in my life, I was in the chapter like, I'm just, once again, chilling. That's
Right.
literally was I
Man.
said, I'm just so excited.
That's when you know something's getting ready to happen.
My goodness. Because I said, I'm so excited to be around other Black engineers. I was
Right.
just happy about that, you know? And so it kind of happened. And so when back to the conversation, so I'm actually glad we were talking about the whole journey to become regional chair in NSBE and all that stuff, because it was in that moment where we had that conversation. You said, well, you have to make a decision. If you make that decision and you go for it, and if you happen to win, you know I'm going to be there for you.
Absolutely.
But I think, to your point of the advice you gave earlier, you probably said something to the point of, you know, what is it that you can learn or grow in if you're going to go on that journey?
Yeah.
And I do remember just thinking about all the things we talked about. And one of those things was going to the Engineering 2020 requirements and seeing that a leadership credit from a leadership class was one of the things that you could get. And so I remember making that decision of like, okay, I'm going to do this leadership credit. They offered it as a pre-session. So that really helped me out because, you know, them engineering classes, it's a lot during the semester. I said, I'll get it done in 1 week.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to do this. 8 to 5 every day.
Yep.
Kansas Leadership Center was the one putting on the leadership course. And I'll never forget, it was January of 2014. And so I remember going and we had to do a pre-reading.
Yeah, Peter Cohen.
Yes, Dr. Cohen. Leadership on the Line was the book we had to read. So we had to do that over Christmas break. I said, they got me reading over Christmas break and I didn't even read her like that, you know? So it was already challenging me. I get in the class and it was one of the most unique experiences I have ever had in my life. About 40 students. The classroom is divided. We're sitting across from each other. So 20 students on one side, 20 students on the other, facing each other. I said, what in the world is going on? I'm one of the only Black Latino students in the class. And Dr. Cohen is sitting in the middle. And I don't know exactly, but I always use this example. Like, he just sat there, you know, we're sitting there. It's the first day. And he says something like, grass is green, the sky is blue. Now, those probably weren't his exact words, but it was that type of thing. Yeah. And I said, now what in the what is this leader like? I just remember thinking like, what is going on? And then silence. He just sat there. And the class, people just start everywhere. And in those moments, I get very recluse. Like, I'm such a people person and I'm out in the front and I like to have attention and stuff. But in those moments, it's like, oh, you want to be the leader? Be the leader. I just kind of, there's something in me that just kind of shuts off. Yeah. And so we had multiple days of this and we had debriefing conversations. And we got to one part one day, I think it was the Wednesday. I think it was middle of the week, Wednesday. And race comes up. I'm one of the only, if not I think maybe the only Black person in the room, Latino person in the room. Maybe there was one other, but I cannot think past 3 people in that group of 40. And there's a white young student, you know, same age as me. And he's just kind of defining the Black race in a way and just how he's like talking about like, no, it would be this and it would be that. I can't remember all the specifics, but I just remember sitting there like, how is somebody else who is not Black, who is not Latino, going to tell me about my lived experience and what needs to happen or not needs to, you know? And I could see the room was uncomfortable, but if it's not your experience, you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't say anything or speak or anything. And as he kept going and someone else stood up and started, the pressure is just coming to me of like, you have to say something. You have to. And I was like, I don't want to say something. This feels very vulnerable. This feels very, I don't like conflict. That has been a history of Roy. I really shy away from that. And I'm still growing in that. And for some reason, I was like, no, I have something to say. And mind you, I really hadn't said much those entire 2 days leading up to it. And so I just start speaking and just speaking from the heart. And I mean, I'm starting to get frustrated as I'm speaking. And then I start crying. And I got so mad that I started crying because I'm like, I don't want to be seen as weak in this room. They're already thinking about Black people and Latino people a certain way. And I'm standing up for them, but I'm standing up for them and I'm crying. So this looks so weak. Like I'm not representing my people. I mean, that's what's going in my head, but I'm still speaking about, you absolutely have it all wrong. This is my I got called the N-word in the drive-thru at McDonald's at 15 years old what kid should have that experience? A
Right.
kid.
Right.
That's just one thing. Being followed in the store my mom works, all the different
All
things
the
that have
things,
happened
right.
to many of us growing up. And when I finished, I mean, it was silent. And I'm just crying and crying. And I think I ended up getting up and like walking to the back of the room or even stepping outside of the classroom. And it was just silent in there. And I think Dr. Cohen debriefed or whatever, and we had a break. And he came up to me and he said, out of all the years that I've been teaching this class, I've never seen something like that. You were so courageous. You leaned into vulnerability. And there's so much power when it's done right. Mind you, I'm thinking he's coming to talk to me about having an outburst of how horrible that was from a leadership standpoint. And when I tell you that moment changed my life.
Yeah.
And so I have been a fan of the Kansas Leadership Center since that moment because it taught me there's so much power in vulnerability done right, not just crying and stuff just to do it. And that you don't have to have the title to speak truth to power, to stand up. And so like, I'm literally getting emotional right now thinking about that experience because it changed my life. And it's been applicable all these years, but I did that, remember, because I was wanting to run for regional chair. Well, I won the regional chair, position. And in that time, when we were planning the fall regional conference for the next year, which was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, long story short, some advisor, not even on the board, older than us, was giving me and my treasurer so much grief to the point where when we got on site, I stood up in front of my board of 22 people and said, yes, the fall regional conference chair is the chair on site, because that was the rule in NSBE. Whoever the FRC chair was, they're the chair for that weekend.
Right.
Symbolic, because they're running everything.
Right.
I knew this because I was just the FRC chair.
Right.
But because that person who was advising and was being really petty and nasty and ugly, a professional person, someone working in corporate advising us, and I had never had that experience, and he was like, just remember, everyone, so-and-so is the chair this weekend, and like looked at me when they said that. And so I stood up in front of my board and was like, yes, she's the chair this weekend, but I'm the regional chair. And I was really talking to him, but I said it to my board. And that first day of the conference, because when you're on the board, this, you're working the checkout table, all the different things. Everybody has an assignment. It was chaotic. I mean, the worst I've seen in a conference at NSBE. I mean, people were not in their positions. People slept in. It was just, and I'm, like you said, the buck stopped with me. And my shout out to my vice president, because he came up to me and he said, Roy, the board is in disarray, and it's because of what you said at the meeting. He called me out. And it was at that moment that I remembered KLC. And I called an emergency meeting and I said, guys, I was wrong. I had to be vulnerable. I was wrong. I said I was the chair, and you know that already. I'm frustrated about something else. And I apologize. That's not the leader I want to be. And you don't deserve that.
So powerful.
Now that I've addressed it, we still have a conference to plan. We still have a conference to run and execute. And it ended up being one of the best. To me, and I really do attribute this to KLC. And I know STEMusic Nation, you're like, wow, he's really staying on this, because it was so impactful. Because not only did the rest of the conference become a huge success, the next national chairperson that would come out of Region 5 was at that conference and was introduced to NSBE leadership and what you could do. And it always makes me think of like, wow,
right. How you're building. Well, the notion of, we say that it's a leadership competency to be able to speak from the heart and to do that in a way with vulnerability to build trust. We say that everybody has an exercise of leadership. Now, I'm not willing to say, the folks in my office know that I have the authority. And frankly, I have the authority to shut down just about anything I decide to shut down. And our ethos would make that completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't know all of any one thing. In fact, I know about 5 things, but I have enough people.
Yeah.
And so you got to have your people. And that's both the maturation process and the development of what I think real leadership looks like.
Yeah. It has served me so well. I mean, even in spirit, as an engineer, okay, I was kind of just working as an engineer, and I kind of stepped into some leadership positions during that time, but then in HR, leading a college internship program across the entire company. So many of those lessons from NSBE, from KLC were coming to play. So I'm just passionate about the
I
work
love
that
that.
you all are
Thank
doing.
you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And like I said, please share it with Ed, because I remember listening to him speak about why this thing was getting started and all this stuff. And I'm like, little does he know, like, the impact it's had on my life and the successes and different things I've been able to experience through some of those core lessons from that week-long
I
experience
love it.
that started out as, now what in the world is going on in this classroom, to like,
Yeah.
oh, I
That's
get
what
it.
it is.
This is so powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess to close out that conversation, what are some of your most critical leadership principles, if that's what you call them, or
Yeah.
that you think are great takeaways? I think we talked about some of them. I just shared some of them in the story that I was telling. But before we pivot to the music, what are some of those that you kind of lean on the most? And maybe even as you're bringing in people into KLC, like, hey, you might consider this or that.
Yeah. Well, I think first that there's an obligation. Now, no one else at my place says that, right? But I'm a firm believer that to whom much is given, much is expected. I would say even required.
Yes.
And so in this day and time, and especially for your listeners, this is not a time to sit back. You don't have to be in the front of the room, but the recognition that no one is coming to save you. Dr. Cohen wasn't going to save you in that moment. And he knew that the heat was building on you. Leadership happens when there's discomfort. As long as we're comfortable, we don't do anything. Real leadership only shows up in moments of discomfort, disenchantment. You think there could be something better and that you can do something to help make that happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's first and foremost. The other thing I would say, particularly for this audience, our audience today, is that it may not look like leadership. Everyone can exercise leadership anytime, anywhere.
Yeah.
But it may not always look like leadership. We may have to do some really creative things. We might not be able to walk in the front door and say exactly what it is that we want to say with our full authentic self, with, say it with your chest. We might have to go around through a window.
Yeah.
We may have to do some other things. And so building those skills, I think, are absolutely critical.
That's powerful. No, I fully agree. And I think it's just helpful advice. I love the part. I literally had chills just now when you were saying, like, no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to save us, and having to stand up and lead in those moments.
Yeah.
But I love what you just said too. And I think it goes back to the very beginning of this podcast episode, is the strategy around it.
Yeah.
There's a way to do different things. Sometimes, yes, it needs to be loud. Sometimes it needs to be, let's get everything together and then pop out and show them, so I love that. Okay, man, this has been amazing. I'm so grateful. Like, this is everything I've wanted it to be and more. It's the way that I've imagined it. And for such a time as this too, the role that you're in right now, it's like, wow, God, it all makes sense that it's happening now, whereas I was thinking about in the past of like when I wanted,
it always
Yeah. So we're going to jump into music before we wrap up this episode. And as I always do with my guests, I'm asking, hey, who do you like to listen to? What are 2 songs you want to provide? And so what I do is I listen to them and then provide some, bullet points on what I thought, what my experience was, whether I knew the song before or not, and then let you kind of talk about
I can't wait to
what
hear
it is. Yes, that why you chose the song. So in this music portion, so PYT, Pretty Young Thing, Michael Jackson. So man, when I saw it come through the text, I was like, hey, I'm so excited to listen to this. So I put So Groovy. I just want to dance. Like, when it comes on, I just want to dance. I love the breakdown. That da 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 da. I mean, I love that part of it. And then the call and response. Pretty young things, repeat after me. I said, nah, nah, nah. Like, it's just such a great song, a fun song. And just makes you feel, about whoever that person is in your life, maybe, or when you're having that experience in love, in relationships, like, hey, let's dance. I want to love you. I want to celebrate you. I want to lift you up. So why did you choose that as one of your songs?
I love it. The first album I ever got was Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Okay.
First album ever. I put little properties of Kaye stickers all over
I know that's
the
right.
record cover.
Ain't nobody taking this
Right,
album.
because it wasn't the album. He was going to marry me. He just
okay.
didn't know it yet.
Okay.
He didn't know it yet. He hadn't come to Wichita to meet me. So I was claiming him. It just makes me happy.
Yeah.
I can't hear it and not smile. I can't hear it and not move.
Yeah.
It elevates. It's almost a spiritual just awakening moment for me. So it's just one of my faves.
I love that. That's how I felt. Literally, I was like, I already know the song, but like as soon as I played the thing, it just made me start dancing. Now, what y'all don't know is the next song that Dr. Kaye Monk Morgan gave me took me out, all the way out. And I told her in the text, I said, I'm going to be crying. And she was like, oh no, I said, it's in the best way. So this is Alabaster Box by CeCe Winans. Ooh, I'm going to try to pull it. No, I'm not. If I cry, I cry. Look, the first bullet point literally is tears, immediate tears.
Yeah.
This song is so beautiful. It's definitely been a part of my life story and my journey. I put the musicality of the song too. The intro of the song.
Yes.
I mean, it's just.
Yep. You got to wait for her.
Yes. And it's like, I put setting the atmosphere. It's like setting the atmosphere for worship. I was a praise and worship leader for so long, 5 years or so. And that was an important part. Like sometimes just jumping into a song, it's like, okay, let's let something, and actually Michael Jackson would say this in his This Is It movie. I was just talking about it with a friend. Let it simmer.
Yeah.
Let it simmer and then bring it to the boil,
Wow.
And so I also put so descriptive. The songwriter, a friend of mine, actually, she's from Mississippi. And I believe the songwriter was from a church near where she went, or the church she went to, or somewhere she knew of her in or had some connection or something, being from Mississippi. And so just the descriptive nature of the words. And then the last two bullet points were, you weren't there the night Jesus found me. That part of the song always just takes me out, because I just think about my faith journey and so many other people who may be on that journey or interested, or it's like when Jesus finds you, and for me, it's not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It's a multiple thing over my life.
Yeah.
It's like, you weren't there. The amount of power and you don't know the cost of my praise was the last bullet point of all the things that I have personally been through in my life. If you see me, when you see me praising God or giving him credit or whatever, and certainly I'm someone now in a matured state of worship who you worship. For Roy's story and Roy's life journey, is God for me. And so when you see that, you don't know the cost of that praise. Like, so, I'm gonna hold it together.
Yeah.
But why did you choose this song?
For many of the same reasons. I think I doubled down on the line of, you weren't there when he found me, and not, I confessed my faith in Christ as a child. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about 2 weeks ago when I didn't like my husband. I'm talking about 3 weeks ago where I was unsure about a thing I needed to do at work. I'm talking about every time I've gone into myself thinking my job is to figure it out, or I'm hiding, or I don't show up the way I want to show up. Those are the times when he's finding me. So that just speaks to me time and time and time again. And the notion for me of people not just not knowing the price of the praise, but the price that we pay for the win. I often have had, and I'm sure some of your listeners have too, people assume that you have things because people give them to you. One of my best friends in life said to me one time, one of the most hurtful things. She said to me, I don't understand why people just give you stuff. And she allowed herself, she knew, these folks are showing up and asking, hey, I have a job, would you be interested? She interpreted that as me being given something rather than me having earned those things. I've earned every opportunity that's been provided. And oftentimes it means I'm doing stuff that other people won't do. I'm working harder than other people are willing to work. I'm doing tasks that other people think are beneath them. People don't know what it costs in order to sit in the seats. And when people don't understand the cost, they're reckless with you. The number of folks who have come and said, I want to use your name, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. You can't just have my social capital. Now, I'll give it as evidenced by any and everything you've ever asked me to do. I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
On the front line.
Yeah.
If not first, I'll be second.
Yeah.
Your mama. Right. I'm not ready to, she'll take me down. But that notion of people think you're winning or you're in a seat, so you should provide that for me or provide access to that for me. You don't know what it costs for me to get here. You don't know what it costs for me to keep it. And you don't know what it is it means for me to give it away.
I'm just sitting in that. I'm tearing up because, one, I feel so seen. And I think I know that to be true. I know that to be true. And so, yeah. And it kind of puts a whole different perspective on that song. But thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Because I know there's people out there who feel that way, of when stuff is handed to you and people are like, it's handed to you? No. Earned, fought for, the sleepless nights, the traveling all over, all the different things. So that is really powerful, really good. And I think the thing that also makes me emotional is we get to have God with us.
Yes.
Even though people are
Yes.
saying, we get to have this God that's like, I got you. I know they saying this, or I know they saying that, or I know you're even saying something to
Just
yourself.
keep doing it.
Just, I got you.
Just focus.
I got you. Yeah. Oh man. So good.
Yeah.
Whew. I just kind of want to just sit in this. I'm like, no, this is so good. But I know we have to go and wrap up. And so, whew, look, STEMusic Nation, I'm ready to just praise right now. Okay. But we got to move to the STEMusic jingle. So I'm going to try to get my mind and remember, because y'all know I be struggling to remember what the jingle is. So I give our guest a word, a STEM word or phrase. And so you picked kinetic energy.
Did.
I was very excited about this. I said, ooh, this is going to challenge you. I like a good challenge in songwriting or making a jingle. And so we're going to see if I remember how this goes. I think I have it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and kinetic energy, moving everything. The energy an object has in motion. Kinetic energy, moving everything. Half times mass times velocity squared. Kinetic energy, moving everything. More mass, more speed. It's more you see of kinetic energy, moving everything. A big part of physics in every moving thing.
I love that.
Thank you. I remembered it. I'll be so excited when I remember it. So yeah, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. I think we might need to do a compilation once all the episodes are over, and just put it on a Spotify playlist and put it out there.
I love that. That was fantastic.
Thank you. And I think it's just a fun thing, one, for me, but also just to continue to show the power of music and how, like, if you're singing this jingle over and over again, you could go to anyone in the world and tell them what kinetic energy is. You got the potential of that roller coaster going up.
Even the formula.
Yes. Yeah. The moment it starts, having the motion, boom, there's your kinetic energy. So, man, and I feel like in this episode, it's so interesting that was your word. There's been so much kinetic energy of motion, of movement, of thought, of principles, of heart, of leadership, of struggle, of journey.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And so we come to the final question, and it's really about what you've been doing this entire podcast. But if you had a final piece of advice to someone pursuing a career in STEM, but I think even broader than that, because of, yes, your STEM journey, but then also you now being in leadership, and from the perspective of everybody being, where the buck stops in that, even though we just talked about that everybody can lead, it's still a position that you hold. What advice would you give someone if they're seeking that type of a leadership position, or if they're just trying to progress in their career? What would that be?
I think I would just encourage, particularly mid-career, early career professionals, to find people who are doing things that align with who you are, and watch them. Just watch them. Oftentimes people say, well, I'm looking for a mentor.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that everybody has time to do that. And I'll have a cup of coffee with just about anybody. right? If there's a thing, I can't say that there's one person that I want to be like, but I know that I want to be able to do that like you, and I want to be able to do that like that. And I think if I built this skill like her, that would be awesome. So observe, always be observant, always be picking up those things. And when people give you advice, follow it. If you know their heart and that they have a heart for you,
Yeah.
and if someone comes to you and says, you know what, you're not ready for that, believe them. Believe them. Your question should be, what should I be doing to get ready?
Say that one more time. I
Yeah.
think that's because sometimes when when I'm asking people to give advice or when we are getting advice, it's like, okay, you said that, but I don't know. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
So what was that question again?
When folks say you're not ready, or why do you think you're ready, or I didn't get something that I wanted, the question should be, what should I be doing to get ready?
That's good.
Right? I'm always looking for evidence. What is the evidence that you're prepared? And it doesn't have to show up on your resume, as we've said multiple times.
Yeah.
It can show up in the other work that you're doing, in the other spaces, skills that you're building. So get good at something, listen to people who care about you, and just keep going.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna close it out, but I did want to give you a chance to talk about maybe what you're most excited about when it comes to the Kansas Leadership Center. I think we talked about a lot of the work that the Kansas Leadership Center does in my story and some of the stories you told, but I think I'd be remiss if I don't allow you to one, kind of pub it. I think we've been pubbing it this entire time because I'm in love with the Kansas Leadership Center. I will always speak highly of it. I've read the book, When Everyone Leads, all of that. But what are you most excited about? And maybe even for people, we've been talking about it, but like, what is the Kansas Leadership Center? Maybe for those who don't even know, because I mean, young professionals, mid-career professionals, maybe trying to rise in leadership might need to go through a course similar to what I did, that type of thing.
The Kansas Leadership Center is an organization that really fosters leadership, but not the leadership from a space of authority. Our goal is to get everyday citizens, folks up and down a ladder and across sectors, to engage in what we think is leadership, which is showing up. Asking really good questions, being present in spaces. We have a set of competencies and skills that we try to encourage people to lean into. And so we do a lot of leadership development. We do some civic engagement work, because ultimately we might train you as it relates to your job, but we want that to show up at the Boys and Girls Club. We want that to show up at your church. We want that to show up in your motorcycle club. We want those skills to be transferable in lots of other places in our community. Things I'm really excited about, we're building a youth program.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? I can't do anything without thinking of children and young people.
I just got chills. That is very exciting.
We're actually in the pilot phase of piloting the curriculum, and we're going to have some near peers, college age students, trained in order to be able to provide instruction, with lots of focus on Black and Brown communities, because our babies need it. I'm a queen of making sure that our babies are getting what it is that they need. And I'm writing a book.
Come on, book.
I'm writing a book.
Come on, author. Hello, author.
I know, right? I'm claiming it. I've only done 5,000 words so far, and I have.
Hey, but it's a start.
25,000 more to go. But I'm writing a book.
That's exciting.
From a KLC framework, or adaptive leadership framework, what does it look like to exercise leadership when you do have authority? Right? Oftentimes, folks with authority question, well, what does it mean when everyone can lead, when I'm supposed to be the leader? Right? I'm going to answer that question.
Oh, I love this. Wow. Y'all, we got that little sneak peek, STEMusic Nation. See, I'm trying to tell you, I'm on my job. I'm on my job. But no, thank you for sharing that. That is very exciting. I'm interested to hear more about those. I will keep my eye out for more of those. But just want to say thank you for one, taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
STEMusic Nation, the time that we're filming this, we both got on boots because, it was like -1 wind chill, snow on the ground, 6 degrees outside.
Cool.
So when I say she rides for me, this is living proof and example. So thank you for making the time. And also just thank you for investing so much into my life.
Absolutely.
And being there for me in so many different facets, personally, professionally, and just showing me that whatever it is I put my mind to, it is out there for me to
Absolutely.
obtain it, with the power of God and faith, but also with the hard work.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you so much for being on the STEMusic podcast.
You're so very welcome.